Thank you. Thank you so much for everyone joining us. We will be recording this event, and so hopefully you can share it with any others that wanted to join as well, and we'll be able to use it as a resource in the future. So first of all, welcome. It's the roots of the Kenyan Fmnr movement, or Farmer Managed Natural Regeneration movement in Kenya. Sarah Mackenzie, who you can see in wearing the same shirt as myself, as Sarah and I are both joining you here from from the Wurundjeri lands over in Melbourne, Australia. And both of us have been working on Fmnr for around 10 years now. But we are very, very proud and excited to be able to share with you some of the experiences from Kenya, from our Kenyan colleagues. The journey and the story of Fmnr in Kenya has been an inspiration for much of our work, and is a story that we tell widely in our work promoting and sharing Fmnr with other countries around the world. And we're very excited to be able to spend some time with you today exploring the history and some of the journey that has been occurring in Kenya, and some of the achievements so far, with some thoughts about where it might go next. But first of all, I'd like to just give you some small tips on how you could interact with us today. As you'll see, we've got a number of different presenters who'll be speaking and sharing some of their experiences. But we would like to encourage you also to join in sharing some of your knowledge through the question and answer. You'll see a small tab at the bottom of Q&As if you have any questions for our speakers, or through the chat in sharing some of your experiences as well. We won't be able to have necessarily a long Q&A session today. This is just a short starting point for a very long conversation, but I would encourage you to put in your questions, and each of our speakers will be moderating those as well. Sarah will be moderating the questions overall and responding to as many as we can during the session. And keep an eye out for any links as well, because we'll be sharing a number of resources as we go today. I would also encourage you to please reach out to any of the speakers after this and to stay in touch. And we're hoping that this is a starting point for a long conversation and continuing to work together to further spread farmer managed natural regeneration and to realise some of the land restoration benefits that it can achieve. But to start us off, I'd like to ask Sarah if she can give us a very brief overview on what exactly is Fmnr to start us off. Thanks.
Thank you, Alice, and hello to everyone who's joined. So I looked through the speaker list or the attendee list, and I think most people on the call are already Fmnr experts. But for those who are new, Fmnr stands for Farmer Managed Natural Regeneration. Most people know its origin story, which is the amazing Tony Rinaudo really reinvigorating this Indigenous practice, which is the systematic pruning of these sprouting tree stumps. So instead of them staying in shrub form, we're cutting them down, as you can see in this image, and encouraging their growth into a mature tree. And as everyone on the call knows, these trees provide myriad benefits to a community in terms of soil quality, decreasing erosion, wind breaks, and potential fertilising to crops. But the other way that we often talk about farmer managed natural regeneration is talking about this community development practice. So it's where we really take it beyond just an agroforestry technique, and we start looking at how we can use it to really empower communities to have a tool that is low cost, sustainable, easily replicatable in order to meet their own landscape regeneration objectives. And we've also found from lots of experience that there are other enabling components that really allow Fmnr to take off. So integrating it with livelihoods programming, ensuring that there's advocacy components so that local government can ensure that Fmnr has laws and funding to support it. And also linking with other natural resource management or agroforestry approaches. So you might need to supplement with tree planting. But all the speakers today are going to give you a really deep dive into how this has been contextualised within the Kenya context. Alice, have we got a video in the next one to give people a bit of a view?
Have we got audio?
No, despite our sound check earlier, I'm not sure if we're gonna
I
we're
might
gonna
have
get
to
this
ask
one.
kindly if Jonathan, if you would mind, please stopping and restarting that, and we'll see if it works from your side. Or perhaps maybe because you're muted, Jonathan. I wonder if that's.
To grow quickly. And then we manage the constraints.
Over 240 members in Marsabit County are engaging in farmer-managed natural regeneration activities at community level, supported by World Vision through the Imara program. The pastoralist groups have adopted the Fmnr concept to help as part of Imara's regreening initiatives.
We work with environmental management committees, which are in every location. We work with mother-to-mother support groups. We work with youth groups, and we work with even women groups, self-help groups. Basically, when we practice Fmnr in this community, we are targeting the indigenous species, which have high value to the community members in terms of their livelihood.
The pastoral community groups have created Fmnr demonstration sites that are protected in efforts to nurture young trees and stumps.
Unaona sahi hapa kama kutoka ukiangalia saa hii mahali wameanzisha ni kama ekari 5 kwa sababu ni mpaka huko chini, na mahali yote ambao tutapata shooting ya hii acacia tunajaribu kuprotect.
I think that's where. Thank you, Jonathan, for solving those small problems. We're going to leave that one there. It's just a very brief taste of what Fmnr might actually look like in the field. Obviously, if we were able to all be together face to face, we would have obviously loved to take you to some of these sites to see and feel what Fmnr would look like. But here's a small taster, and hopefully we can share some more with you. Thank you, Sarah, for that definition and overview to start us all off together. I'd like to just move to the next slide if I can, and just give you a brief overview of what we're hoping to cover today as we're together. We will have a number of different speakers sharing with you some of the different aspects that they're working on. Festus from World Vision Kenya is one of our project managers who's been working on Fmnr in the Central Rift Valley. He will be presenting some of the origins of Fmnr and how it has evolved from an Indigenous practice in Kenya and where it has come to today. Charles Odhiambo is also a manager of the Regreening Africa project in Kenya, which we're all very proud of. And he will be taking us through some of the different benefits and achievements that Fmnr has produced in Kenya in different projects that we've been working on in different locations. Jonathan Muriuki from the World Agroforestry in Kenya will be taking us through some of the research that he has been doing over the past few years, looking at some of the barriers to adoption of Fmnr and trying to understand some of those drivers and what the potential future directions for Fmnr might be in Kenya. And then after we've had an overview of those different presentations and understanding of what Fmnr looks like in Kenya, we're very lucky to be able to take it to some of our partners who are now, as Fmnr is scaling up and building momentum and becoming more and more common, and many partner organisations are also taking this on and adopting it and spreading it in their own way. And we'll have a panel talking to us shortly to give some experience, share some of their experiences of how they're using Fmnr in different aspects and then sharing it beyond as well. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Festus to start us off, and please feel free to continue to add your questions and answers and your reactions in the chat as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alice. Yeah, so I'm going to take you through Fmnr as an indigenous practice that communities have been adopting since time immemorial. Communities have been using Fmnr to unlock the richness that nature has to meet their needs at household level. So when Fmnr was introduced in Kenya, began mobilizing communities. Next slide, Alice. Yeah, thank you. So as a traditional practice, from those photos, you can see a farmer there, basically a smallholder farmer, leveraging on indigenous knowledge from one of the acacia species being used as a fodder, especially in time of droughts. So communities could set apart a land for grazing during the dry season, and it could provide a fodder bank during those times of harsh climatic conditions. You can see that is an acacia species. They use the bark to feed the animals, and the children, you can see the knowledge transfer. The children are watching closely, and that is impacting on them. That transfer of knowledge is happening. So mature trees were cut at stump level. They had knowledge around managing trees through what foresters call pollarding, that is managing cutting the trees from the top. And they would also do rotational grazing. So that was it has been practiced since even before conventional farming methods were introduced. Next slide, Alice. So mature trees were cut at stump level, those which had the abilities to coppice, and other trees were cut from the top through pollarding. So when World Vision Kenya began promoting Fmnr, they utilized the bottom-up approach, where communities were mobilized. And they always say, if you focus on landscape transformation, you lose it. But when you focus on mindset change, you win, because it all begins from changing the mindsets of the community. So communities have been mobilized to increase tree cover, utilizing the already known knowledge that they have. And this works for smallholder farmers and pastoralists, Kenya being 80% arid. So that places Fmnr at a very pedestal point to drive ecosystem restoration. So farmers and pastoralists share knowledge amongst themselves. And most importantly, women are the drivers of Fmnr at the grassroots. So that's stimulating growth, peer-to-peer knowledge for wider uptake. So women inclusion and having women drive that, it is so the movement is driven by women, and also aligning Fmnr with other alternative livelihood options to develop value chains and further enhance Fmnr as a sustainability strategy at the grassroots. So my parting shot would be, let's use Fmnr to restore what was lost, especially in the ASAL. Use Fmnr to heal what was damaged, and also utilize Fmnr to protect and conserve what remains. Onwards Fmnr, and for Kenyans, Milele Fmnr. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you, Festus. I wonder if Charles, would you like to continue?
Yes, I'll continue from here, Alice. So Thank you so much, Festus, for taking us through such an introductory overview of Fmnr and how it has taken roots in Kenya from the traditional practices. So what I'm going to share now is on the benefits of Fmnr and also the achievements of Fmnr in Kenya. So when I look at benefits of Fmnr in Kenya, I'll be looking at it from the three perspectives: economic benefits, social benefits, as well as environmental benefits. And the data we are looking at here is data that has been captured in Kenya over 10-year period from 2010 to 2020. And this is data from 21 counties ranging from Turkana in the Rift Valley or in the northwestern part of Kenya to parts of Migori and Homa Bay, and also parts of Rift Valley, Nakuru, Samburu, Laikipia, Isiolo, as well as Elgeyo Marakwet, and even parts of the northern Kenya and the eastern and coastal region. So I'll start by looking at economic benefits. Fmnr has been identified to lead to increased crop yields. So in lands where Fmnr has been practiced, research has shown that this because of the fact that Fmnr supports in terms of moisture conservation, reducing temperatures, and also supporting in terms of soil and water. In terms of soil texture and structure development. So yields here, when we talk of yields of crops, whether you do monocropping or mixed cropping, yields have been shown to increase, particularly in parts of Makueni, Kitui, Machakos, as well as also Baringo and Nakuru. Fmnr also leads to increased fodder and as well as pasture because under the trees, there is a ameliorated climate or environment that tends to support resprout or regrowth of fodder trees as well as pasture. And for most of the pasture, some of these seeds are naturally under the ground there, like for African foxtail grass, and they increase. And even during dry seasons, land which is under Fmnr tends to have more fodder and pasture productivity compared to land which does not have Fmnr. It has also shown increased livestock productivity and survival. The yield of milk from livestock which are fed in areas under Fmnr tends to be higher, even during dry spells, as well as meat production in those areas. Even manure production tends to be much higher in those areas. And where there are severe droughts, like it was witnessed in the Horn of Africa in the year 2011, those areas where Fmnr was practiced, the livestock tended to have survived much better compared to areas where Fmnr was not practiced. Fmnr also leads to increased household incomes as well as increased returns from value addition or value chain development. So you'll find that in those areas where Fmnr was practiced, then people were able to diversify by ecosystem services, and so there were more products that they were able to access and utilize, and some which they could convert into income, particularly when you consider honey as a nature-based product that comes from the trees. Then as the picture that Festus just shown, then you'll find people are able not only to sell firewood and charcoal in those areas, but were able to conserve the environment and also be able to get more income from honey and such products, as well as things like gums and resins. There was reduced impact of floods and droughts in those areas. I think I've mentioned this, particularly in Kitui, in Machakos, Makueni. This was observed even in Tana River, that the flood impact was reduced because the reed sprouts anchored the soil more firmly, and so they were able to reduce the effect of floods. And even the effect of drought was also reduced because of the undergrowth under there. Then Fmnr supported in creation of new business models, whereas people tended to think of, in some of those parts, only charcoal or firewood as the most viable business for smallholder farmers. FMNR created such new viable business models like for gums and resins, and also for honey, alongside other herbal and medicinal uses that could be coming from trees. Next slide, please. Alice, next slide. So the previous slide, please. Social benefits. FMNR tends to improve food and nutrition security of the household, simply because there are some of the herbs that either directly from the trees or that also grow as a result of improved soil and texture and improved water retention. You get some herbs that can be edible. And then another important factor here is that from FMNR, there are some of those indigenous fruits that many children of today never used to know. They find them also there, and when they have started to ripen, they see the adults eating them, and they also pick and also eat them. So when children are on their way, even from school or grazing in the fields, they are easily picking some of these fruits like guava and other traditional fruits. They just eat them, and many of them are very rich in vitamin C, and therefore they tend to improve food and nutrition security in the household, even when it is very dry. And because of that, there's improved living conditions in the sense that people are able to sometimes also sell some of these indigenous fruits and get money. And also in the sense that people are then going to have to spend little money on buying some of these fruits for food in the household. The FMNR also brings a reduction in the distance that women and even girls spend in terms of looking for firewood. And this is very important because that time which is now reduced can be put into more productive activities. And that is something that when you look at the qualitative aspects or benefits of FMNR, women have said that they have now more time to spend in their groups and get more money from those groups. Some of them have said they have more time now to spend with their children and look at their work from school. Others have said they have also more time to spend even with their husbands at home. And that also tends to bring more harmony in the family. The FMNR has supported also in reducing nature-based conflict, particularly over grazing fields and water, because it has supported in improving land governance, where grazing routes and grazing calendars are designed and shared with neighboring communities. And so you find that communities that have hitherto been in conflict because of such nature-based conflicts are no longer at that kind of conflict. FNR has also supported even to reduce wildlife-human conflict in many of these areas, because with the wildlife having known places delineated like forested or game reserves, then some of the products that people used to go to the forested land to get, they are now getting at their homesteads within their farms, and so they no longer go there. So the livestock are confined to their environment, and human beings are also in their own environment. And as a result of FMNR, it is important to note that most of the youth are now tending to be retained in those areas where they would have been thinking of moving to the urban places to look for white-collar jobs. So it has reduced rural urban migration, something that we also take cognizance of. Next slide, please. Environmental. So in terms of environmental benefits, I think some of them I've mentioned, and the picture on the left tends to show clearly what can be achieved with FMNR. With mulching, as you can see there, with some of the crops giving ground cover and multiple layers of crops. Some are fruit trees, others are vegetables, and others are annual crops. Then FMNR tends to reduce soil erosion as a result of the fact that with the proper management and the fact that the tree roots are binding the soil particles together, that is something which is very important. Then it also reduces soil moisture evaporation, and as a result of which now the water level in the farm or the water retention is much higher. It also improves soil fertility. This is directly as a result of a lot of organic matter of the soil, and even the fact that it also improves soil structure and texture, and also the fact that there's more moisture retained. It also tends to increase water infiltration and groundwater recharge. Grounds or fields that are under FMNR tend to have much higher groundwater compared to fields that are not under FMNR. This has been scientifically shown. And FMNR also increases biodiversity, environmental restoration, and tree cover on land. And so, as I was saying, fields that are put under FMNR, there is more likelihood of more ecosystem services being obtained as a result of this. And because of that, therefore, it enhances resilience to climate change. I will end by looking at the achievements over time, over the 10-year period in Kenya, from these 21 counties that I talked about. Next slide, please. So, World Vision Kenya, working in Turkana, West Pokot, Kwale, Samburu, Laikipia, Machakos, Kajiado, Siaya, Homa Bay, Marsabit, Baringo, Nakuru, Makueni, Tana River, Migori, Kilifi, Isiolo, Elgeyo Marakwet, Kitui, Narok, and Wajir, has been able to improve climate change resilience of over 202,000 households over a period of 10 years through FMNR and other related interventions in terms of ecosystem conservation. And because of that, over 120,000 hectares of degraded land has been brought under restoration. I want to point out that this is not purely as a result of FMNR as a practice, but in terms of FMNR integrated with other practices like enrichment, planting, fruit tree, planting, and value chain development. It has also supported, it has also been able to support the development of the cottage industry for value chains such as pasture, where people make hay and build them, such as fodder trees, where people sell also the pods and also even honey as well as gums and resins. It has also brought the public-private partnership arrangement into supporting sustainable development, particularly in the ASALs, where you find that private companies are coming to work with governments or county governments to support individuals who then are able to either collect seeds and sell to them, or who are able to plant certain specified trees, and then they provide them with the market. And through this, World Vision has also been able to reduce conflicts of pasture and water, particularly in the ASALs, as I've mentioned, and some of these conflicts tend to get viral and escalate into retaliatory attacks, which then can spiral for quite some time and make the area become insecure, particularly the northern and northwestern parts of Kenya. It has also been shown that through FMNR and other associated practices, World Vision has worked with other partners to enhance restoration of ASAL areas, especially after fire outbreaks or after long and prolonged drought spells. And more importantly, women have been empowered through FMNR, and women have been given a voice. Women have taken up the practice very seriously, as Festus just demonstrated. And as a result of many socioeconomic benefits I highlighted, most of the households are now very stable, and women no longer have to depend for every bit of coin coming from their husbands to run the family. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Charles, for that overview of some of the different ways that FMNR has been experienced and adapted, and some of the benefits it's having for the community. Jonathan, would I be able to invite you to share some of your experiences with FMNR? Jonathan, you're still muted, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Alice. Unfortunately, I'm trying not to touch my computer, so because of the slides. And good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure indeed to be able to participate in this webinar. My name is Jonathan Muriuki from ICRAF. ICRAF, World Vision, and other partners, indeed, CARE, ANDRA, and others have been promoting FMNR. So we are glad to hear the experiences of World Vision in 21 counties, but also we have others like ANDRA who have also done FMNR in Mandera, Kitui, and Turkana. Caritas also work with us in Makueni and promote an Fmnr. So this is spreading. But I was asked to share a few thoughts on why maybe we still have challenges and in the spread and what we can do then in order to make it move. Now, and one of the main challenges about Fmnr has been mindsets, because it's not found to be very attractive compared to other tree planting approaches. For example, looking at the acacia on the left, which has got a lot of dieback, that is within an Fmnr field, a policymaker looking at that is not going to be seeing the outcomes that he can plan for, and therefore there's need to have a conversation around well, what Fmnr can really do and give more of the kind of details that World Vision is giving today. Because if we have to plan for it, then people need to see the bigger picture. So it's easier to plan for things like tree planting. For example, the current 10% tree cover strategy talks about 1.5 billion seedlings. Sorry, it's written million there, but it's supposed to be billion seedlings. But it's very difficult to give that kind of statistics for Fmnr, or as yet we are not there. Again, where we have small land sizes, especially in the humid areas where farmers need to optimize on productivity, Fmnr is not found to be very attractive, because the kind of trees that need to be brought into the farming landscape need to be more lucrative in terms of the value chains in which they can participate in. We do have another challenge of land tenure, and this basically is about especially youth who may find themselves not being able to inherit land in good time, and that combined with the fact that you're dealing mainly with indigenous species, then youth might find themselves being challenged as to whether to participate or not, because the value chains are not clear. For women, actually, it is a good thing for them, because though they may not have decisions on how to plant trees, on where to plant trees on the land, it is a very low-cost approach for them to be able to raise some trees that then they can utilize for their domestic purposes. So in terms of land tenure, actually, Fmnr works well for the women, but it might be a challenge for the youth. Charles just talked about the kind of value chains that we are developing. And as you see, we are doing Fmnr especially for indigenous species, and some of the value chains that are supported by these species are not very developed. And some of them are actually not very clean. For example, the charcoal value chain is not a very clean, so it becomes a bit of a challenge as to use those kind of value chains then to promote indigenous species. Others like honey, medicinal trees, and pasture are still developing, and therefore they do not really motivate people into practice as yet. We still have governance issues, and I'm glad that Charles has talked about the way we are using Fmnr to resolve conflicts in pastoral areas, where, of course, we have a lot of intensity in conflicts. That becomes a big challenge in terms of the introduction, because communities are still moving, the communities are still displaced, and therefore they are not able to practice. While livestock management is also a big thing when livestock is got to cross between various farms and therefore destroy trees and parcels of land that are being brought under management through Fmnr. So it is good to bring in governance approaches that can support that, and I'll speak about that in the next 2 slides. Part of our land, and a huge chunks of it, degraded lands, have moved into denudation status, where it is no longer possible to find stumps and seeds that are able to regenerate quickly, and therefore just practicing Fmnr without other practices to support it becomes a big challenge, and therefore you might need to bring in issues of soil conservation, grass reseeding, and others that enhance denuded services then to be able to become niche areas for trees to regenerate. And a big challenge we have is on invasive species. We got quite a number of species that are invasive in this country, especially in the dry areas. And I'll give an example, examples of prosopis that is spreading across various arid counties and semi-arid counties. We also have Lucina leucosivera, quite extensive at the coast, and a few other counties, but at the coast it is really extensive. We have guava, which is really spreading around Western Kenya and moved out of farmlands into grazing lands and others. We have lantana that is very common, especially in the semi-arid areas. And these species obviously occupy a lot of spaces, and they muzzle the growth of other species. And what then they do is to bring in labor to the farmers and the community members in terms of removal to create spaces for trees that need to regenerate. So they are quite aggressive species, and therefore, when we're talking about Fmnr being low cost, with such species, then it becomes a challenge to practice because it looks like I got muted at some point. So let me repeat that slide. From our work that we have, sorry, let me go to that. From the work that we have done with World Vision in Central Rift, we noticed some of the things that are motivating farmers to uptake Fmnr. And some of those factors were whether the farmer belongs to farmers groups. So building the capacity of farmers groups to be able to educate each other is one of the ways in which we're finding Fmnr being uptaken very well. Farmers with bigger land sizes obviously are more likely to uptake Fmnr, as I talked there, because small land sizes becomes quite a constraint. Training for farmers is also another incentive for uptake of Fmnr. And for farmers who have experienced being able to raise more income from various diversified sources within the household and the farm, are also finding Fmnr attractive because then they can participate in more value chains. So then building on that and the challenges, what are the areas of development that we're looking at? Number one, Kenya, we need to own Fmnr and have a way of simplifying the terminology. Fmnr has under long history coming from the Sahelian countries of Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, which are seen to be quite dry and where acacias were being generated from the soil. The difference in Kenya is that in many of our lands, we've got a lot of, sometimes a lot of trees that are species that are not very useful to the communities, where we need to prune them out and create spaces for the generation of the species that farmers want. And therefore, we need to find a way to own this terminology of Fmnr. In Tanzania, they already call it Viziki Hai, which makes it very internalized and becomes part of the context. And so maybe Kenya, that is something that we need to be looking at, how to coin a terminology for Fmnr in Kenya that makes us love it, makes us promote it. Policies, we do need to develop policies, especially at county level, where there's devolution of environmental implementation so that they appreciate the role of Fmnr. Many counties are putting up policies to do with agroforestry, climate change, environmental management. And if we actually start including Fmnr in this, this is going to be a great thing, especially for those counties in the semi-arid and arid areas. We need to look at how Fmnr can be embedded into the issues of payment for ecosystem services. I have an example here for carbon, but also the issues of hydrology and better water capture for companies and private sector that are benefiting a lot from more improved hydrological processes at landscape level. We can have conversations in which some of these payments then would roll back into the communities and incentivize them then to practice Fmnr more, because some of the species that are being regenerated, we still need to develop value chains for them. And talking about value chains also, the value chains we have seen to work very well for Fmnr, especially in the semi-arid and arid counties, honey, livestock, gums, and resins. There is need for incentives at government level to see how we can develop this to ensure that farmers get better returns from these value chains, and therefore they can invest in Fmnr. But above all, getting governance processes in place grassroots institutions that can create bylaws for grazing management, conflict resolutions, and collective management of integrated landscapes, so that farmers are able to work together at the riparian spaces, at the community spaces where FMNR is useful, and very degraded lands. And building this on into formal institutions that then can support these grassroots institutions to be able to enforce some of the bylaws that they put in place. We're thinking about co-learning for contextualization of FMNR in Kenya because the ecosystems in this country are quite diverse. So what you have in Western Kenya is very different from what you have in Northern Kenya, very different with what you have at the coast. So while the farmer on the right there is going to be concentrating on acacias, other parts of this country may not really be having just acacias. There are different species being used differently. We have optimum tree cover that needs to be determined for almost every area that we are working in. And some of these things can only be studied at the local level. We introduced an approach called plant comparisons in Kitui, Machakos, and Makueni during a project called BRIDEF. And one of the reason why we were doing this is to allow farmers to stand it together with scientists and development workers to come up with what works in their context. And I think given the different contexts that we have in various parts of this country, we need then to work with farmers at grassroots level to come up with what really works for their context so that they can begin to adopt that and begin to get benefits early. And then this can begin to scale both at the local context and scale out into the other contexts. But above all, we need to build a movement. We need to be having a conversation that begins from the community all the way through the county governments and at the national level to see how to coordinate all these processes, linking it all the way to the targets of the NDC, the targets of land restoration, and the targets of biodiversity, and then have collective monitoring approaches across the country. There are quite a number of tools being developed by the Regreening Africa project, for example, the Regreening Africa app. We know that other institutions have got some tools, and we are beginning a conversation right now to see how there can be collective monitoring that then enables investment both at national and subnational levels based on the benefits that we are already seeing from that. So I'd like to finish with this slide to show, and this is a manual, we're calling it a primer for Kenya that we had developed recently between ICRAF and World Vision that we just finished last year and will be launching very soon. We have tried to show where FMNR is very suitable based on the 7 agroecological zones that have been mapped out since the 80s for this country. And we see that semi-humid, semi-arid, and a bit of arid are very highly suitable for FMNR, while very arid situations might have challenges, and humid and sub-humid might be marginally suitable. But the good news here is that the sub-humid to semi-arid and arid counties constitute more than 80% of this country. And therefore, if we can be able to invest in FMNR spreading across all those counties, we'll have achieved our targets of land restoration very successively when everyone is involved. Thank you very much. Back to you, Alice.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And thank you to all our speakers for taking us on a journey through the FMNR as an Indigenous practice and its history in Kenya, through to how communities have adopted FMNR and some of the benefits they've observed. And Jonathan taking us through some of the different future directions that we may see FMNR coming into, and some great resources is the Kenya FMNR Primer. That we ended with there, and keep an eye out for that. It's an excellent document to support any FMNR in Kenya. What I'd like to do now is to be able to introduce you to a number of partner organisations who are also adopting FMNR and supporting it in their own ways. What you've heard is mostly from ICRAF and from World Vision, who've been supporting FMNR over the last 5 to 8 years in Kenya, introducing it from conferences and pilot projects to now having projects distributed very widely right across the country in some very large-scale land restoration efforts. But we're not the only ones who have been speaking about Fmnr in Kenya, as Jonathan and Charles and Festus all alluded to, is that there's now many, many organisations who are supporting this movement and driving it forward. The first person I'd like to introduce you to and to ask a question of as part of our Fmnr Partners panel is Milton Oberka. Milton is a young person who's been promoting Fmnr and supporting as well as practicing it in his community. And Milton, if you'd like to turn your camera on and unmute yourself, as I'd invite all our panel members to do, Peter and Simon and Dr. Carol, if you're also online, could you please unmute yourself and turn your camera on? And I'd like you just to briefly tell our participants, Milton, you know, what have you been doing with Fmnr so far, and what are your plans to take it forward as part of this movement in the future? Just for 1 minute or two, if you can. Milton, are you there? We'll just try and track down Milton. Here he comes. And I do, just while we're waiting for Milton to connect, I'd just like to apologise for everyone. We are possibly going to go over a few minutes. I see that there is lots of enthusiastic questions happening in the Q&A and really interesting panel discussions happening in the chat. I do apologise.
Thanks so much, presenters.
A few minutes
yes,
over
can you hear me?
The hour. Hello, yes. But please, if you can, stay connected. If you can't, if you have another meeting you need to drop off, please stay tuned for the full recording and we will get that out to you. Milton, thank you for connecting. Milton, would you be able to share with us what your experience with Fmnr has been so far and what you're planning on doing to take it forward in the future? Unfortunately, it seems we may have lost Milton again. I wonder while we're waiting
everyone.
to get... Oh, you're
Can
back.
you hear me?
Please, yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you.
Morning.
Oh, Milton, it seems like we may have some problems with your connection. I'm very sorry. It's not coming through well for me. I wonder why, while we see whether we can get a stronger connection to hear you better, Milton, I wonder whether I might be able to ask Simon Choge.
I have problem with my connection. I don't know. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Let's try again, Milton. No. Unfortunately, I think we have lost Milton. I wonder, Simon Choge, are you there? Centre Director for Carefree, would you be able to share with us maybe what some of your experience with Fmnr has been and what you're doing to take it forward in this movement? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, members. I have a pleasure to say something about what Carefree is doing on the Fmnr. We're first of all so happy that the World Vision is doing this work. We're so happy that we've joined it. Now, there's so much work on research that needs to be done for what is going on, because as mentioned by the presenters who were presented earlier, you know, the movement now is becoming strong and it's supporting government in so many ways. There's so much work now going on to plant trees and to restore some of the degraded areas of the country. And so the Fmnr is one of those options that communities are now doing. And we are so happy that for the first time, communities are participating in tree planting and restoration of ecosystems that have been degraded. And so Carefree's activity right now is to track and see the kind of species that are coming up in some of these enclosures, to see in terms of species and in terms of cover, and also more importantly, to see the seed banks the seed banks of the species that are actually in the soil. So Carefree will be very careful to take stock of what is going on. And if possible in future, probably we're going to probably introduce some of the seeds in these systems, because right now there are programs of tree planting that are even involving drones to throw seeds into some of these forests that are being degraded. And so if we shall introduce issues of, introducing some key seeds of some key species in some of the enclosures that farmers are already conserving, this is something that Carefree will be very willing to do in future. And so to us, this is something very, very important. We're happy that, the World Vision started off this process, and it's picking up and actually complementing what the government is doing in restoration. And we're happy that communities in the end will take lead in this process. And so where communities are involved, there's going to be a big success. And so Carefree will also help in formulating some policies at some of the counties that we think this work is successful. And so Carefree will be willing to help in developing these policies that will be supportive to this program. And we look forward to working very closely with World Vision to undertake these studies. So far, we've now taken part in some two sites, one site in Baringo County, another site in Elgeyo Marakwet County in Kenya. And so we're working with a team from World Vision to take stock of the baselines, the kind of species that are now there right from the beginning. And so we keep assessing this after every 6 months to see the changes, and we document those changes. So eventually we shall be able to understand that the key species, the level of the seed bank that is in those areas. And so from these case study areas, we shall have a wider picture of the processes in different counties, and it will form part of our study and the database that we shall produce, so that it will also guide the practice of Fmnr in other counties that probably have not started and will start soon. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Simon, for sharing your experiences. And it's great to hear how a national government research institute is also partnering with the implementation of Fmnr, and how you're including it within your strategy and agenda and taking it forward, and the role you see it in contributing to your land restoration outcomes. I'd now like to invite Peter Alimo, who is one of the farmers who has also been working with us on not only practicing Fmnr himself, but supporting those in his community. He's based in the Migori County and has been working with Regreening Africa project. And I'd just like to ask Peter to share some of his experiences of what he's been doing with Fmnr and where he sees it going in his community.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you, Peter.
This is Peter Limon from southwestern Kenya. I'm a lead farmer in Fmnr. I started way back in 2018, and with assistance from World Vision, I've been progressing fairly well. What I have realized so far is that Fmnr is an eye-opener. When I started off, I thought I was all alone, and before I brought anybody on board, some people already had taken up the idea. They came in and checked what I was doing. They were interested, and they started even before we talked to them. And they are on, I am on. It's like the whole village is catching up because they are seeing the importance. That has really elated me. And right now I am going on organizing for meetings and villagers come and see what I have started, what is on course. And many people are declaring interest and starting off. I think in a short while, Mikei village of Migori County will be an example to our surrounding, because as it is, we had lost almost all our trees, but it's good the stumps remained. And now the stumps, the new stems are coming up, and we are going back to the canopy that we had lost, and we are going back to the trees that we had lost. We are going back to better rainfall pattern that we had lost. I'm happy, and I believe if we continue on this same route, and if the uptake is that encouraging, if it continues that way, sooner or later, this part of Migori County will be a model to copy from. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you for sharing your passion for Fmnr and the good work that you're doing in supporting your community. I would just like to once again just check whether Milton is able to connect, whether he's been able to find a stronger connection, as he, like Peter, has also been working strongly with his community in supporting the more organic uptake of Fmnr to spread amongst his peers as well. Milton, are you able to connect?
Yes, I hope in a better place now. Can you hear me?
Beautifully. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for everyone, especially for the presenters. I think we have learned a lot, and I'll talk from a personal experience. Actually, what I see, what I've heard, because I think that's the most important right now. And I started the Fmnr before I knew it is an Fmnr actually in 2013. And what I did, we bought a land and we actually told someone to cut all the trees because he wanted to be that place to be flat. So after that, the stump again, I witnessed the regrowth. So that happened in 2010. So after 3 years, I realized that there was that regrowth. Then I gained interest by saying, now what I'm going to do is to plant other trees at the same time, nurture the one which has regrowth from the stump. And that happened, and now actually that happened within our home. And if you happen actually to visit our home right now, it's very, very beautiful in terms of the tree coverage because I have different kind of species there. And when I came to know what Fmnr is all about, I became much interest now to actually be, we stay in a village, and even when you are not there, somebody can just walk in and cut down your trees to make charcoal. So we were very, very actually keen, and we made sure that we secure the place. And now there are very big trees actually with different kind of variety in terms of species. And what I've realized within our home, because I have different kind of species of trees, will it be exotic and indigenous, there are 3 things I've witnessed. And this makes Fmnr to be a little bit unique. And I don't have a scientific backup, but it's what I've witnessed. One, you realize that birds, when they perch on indigenous tree species. And I still don't know why. They prefer perching on indigenous tree species. And when they are making their nest, they also prefer nesting on the indigenous tree species. And this actually is something I've kept on asking myself why it is happening, but I don't have a scientific fact here. But it's what I'm witnessing. Why are birds perching on indigenous rather than doing the same on exotic, which I've also planted? At the same time, you realize that in terms of bees, because there are a lot of indigenous tree species there and they are flowering. So every morning you can hear bees buzzing. It's like they're working and collecting the nectars there. So it's a very lively place because every morning you could hear birds singing, they are perching, they are happy. And even the chicks we have, the hens we have, they actually find the home to be so nice because the trees provide the shadows for them. So they love just resting, especially when it's very hot, they love resting there, and they can even protect the younger ones there. So, and even now the kind of, right now, the firewood I'm using at home and even the charcoal, actually they made
Well, unfortunately, it seems like we may have lost Milton, which is very unfortunate because the detail and the picture he was painting of how Fmnr has changed the landscape and the biodiversity and the access to fuelwood was really beautiful and quite enriching complement to our presentations. However, I will hope that in the future that we actually have a number of other Fmnr related webinars planned, that we can go, we plan to be able to go into some more detail about various aspects of how farmer managed natural regeneration can contribute to the scaling of land restoration more broadly across Kenya. We're hoping to look into a number of different aspects, and we'll hope we can be able to draw out some of those more community related outcomes and the observations that Milton and Peter so beautifully described to us. So stay tuned for future webinars. In the interest of time, I will continue to move forward. Unfortunately, due to some connection problems, we weren't able to have Dr. Carol Munemi from Moi University join us today. However, we were going to hear how Moi University is also supporting the scaling of Lantana and how they are embedding it in various different curriculum courses.
Alice?
And
I'm
yes,
so sorry to
Sarah.
interrupt. I think Carol is actually in the call now. Carol, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can follow.
Welcome, Carol.
Carol, please, would you be able to share with us briefly, you know, what it is you are doing with Fmnr and what your plans are to take it forward in the future?
Yes, please. Thank you. Currently, we have plans underway to sign an MOU between World Vision and Moi University. And this signed MOU will open opportunities for Moi University to interact more with the Fmnr technique. This technique will be key in training of students in the institution that are undertaking BSc studies by incorporation of Fmnr into the curriculum. And this will happen in a number of ways. The first one, Fmnr will come in as a field course, as a required field course for all students taking BSc in environmental science degree. And this will happen after first year of the SC before proceeding to second year and third year. And this to prepare the students for second and third year courses that are related with the environmental conservation and land restoration issues. And therefore, Fmnr technique will also be included as a unit in courses that are dealing with these two aspects, environmental conservation and land restoration issues. And some of the courses are participatory environmental management, environmental conservation strategies, indigenous knowledge in natural resource management, and culture and environmental conservation. Another aspect that Moi University will interact with Fmnr technique is through student attachment opportunities. Actually, this was like the main way that opened the gates of interaction of Fmnr University. Attachment of students undertaking environmental sciences, agriculture and agriculture extension degree programs. Fmnr will also be included in more university through establishment of short courses. These short courses will be for both professionals and non-professionals, especially in matters of ecosystem restoration. And finally, with the MOU in place, we will be engaged in research activities, especially on what has been coming out strongly on biodiversity matters and the real effect of Fmnr, their extent of changes in household income. And this will be important to produce concrete scientific proof and disseminate these results through through seminars, conferences, and publications. And this is necessary when it comes to advising policymakers to consider this technology for food security, to include this technology in food security strategic plans. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carroll, and thank you again to everyone who has stuck around for the end of this presentation and for all the amazing questions that have been asked in the Q&A. If you haven't been looking at that, I encourage you to click the bottom where it says Q&A, and you can read some of the conversations we've been having. So just to wrap up before we finish, we really hope that in today's presentation, we have drawn out some of the key elements that are necessary for both introducing Fmnr to a community, but also scaling up to that national level. And I saw there was a lot of interest in the chat about this scaling up question. So we might make sure that's a subsequent topic that we delve into more. But just to draw out some of those key things we've heard, we really want to make sure that inclusive community ownership is central to everything that we're doing. As Alice said, we will do a designated session on making sure that women, people with disability and other marginalised groups can access this practice. Awareness raising and communication, so the amazing power of radio and of caravan shows that our partners like Just Dig It use. This continuous refinement of going from pilot projects to large-scale programming. So Charles, who spoke about the Regreening Africa project, which is really hosting this entire webinar series, is a great example of that. And again, this leads into that idea of continuous contextualization, adaptation, and replication. So if we are, yes, hooray, Festus, if we are in a community where there is a large degree of natural resource-based conflict, we really want to use Fmnr to address that. But if we're somewhere where there's increasing deforestation, that might be our first cab off. We want to use monitoring, evaluation, and research, as Jonathan's shown us, to continually refine the practice and to make sure that we are looking at barriers and enablers as we go forwards. And I think we've just lost that slide. Sorry, Alice. I know that one of the elements is, there we go, multi-stakeholder engagement. So looking at university sectors, looking at local government, and making sure that we're finding those linkage points, whether it's a livelihood linkage point in a value chain or whether it's an advocacy linkage point. And we really want to emphasize that you are a really big part of this. So there are people in this call who we already work with, but there's many of you who we haven't already partnered with. So please make sure that you're dropping any contact information. You'll get contact details for how to get in touch with us in the email that will be sent out. And, you know, it really is about, this looks like a cycle, but it's a web of making all these interlinkages to ensure the scale up of Fmnr is the key to its success. And we thought we would leave you with some parting words from the godfather of Fmnr, Mr. Tony Rinaudo. If we can go to the next slide, please, Alice. So, of course, Fmnr in one form or another has always existed in Kenya, both as a traditional tree management method with coppice management of exotic eucalyptus trees. What strikes me about Kenya is that when the idea of Fmnr as a distinct practice was introduced, it was an idea whose time had come and one which landed on fertile and receptive grounds to germinate in. Today, when I see not just the wide geographical uptake of Fmnr in Kenya, but the deep pool of skilled, committed and enthusiastic Fmnr champions from all walks of life, farmers, researchers, educators, development facilitators, children, I'm very thankful and content that Fmnr is in good hands and will continue to spread and bring benefit to people and the environment for generations to come, and that Kenya will be a beacon of light to other countries facing similar land degradation challenges. So again, thank you so much to those who joined. Thank you so much to our panelists and our speakers, Alice for co-facilitating, and everyone behind the scenes who put this on, Zanelle and Gibson, everyone from ICRAF and Regreening Africa. If you want to find out more about Fmnr, go to the fmnrhub.com. We also have a Twitter, which is @FMNRHub, and we'll make sure we send out those resources with the recording in the coming weeks. But just to say thank you again. I'll stick around for another couple of minutes if there's any questions or comments in the chat, but please enjoy the rest of your days and your evenings. Alice, anything else that I've forgotten?
Not at all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely day.
We had some raised hands, Sarah.
Hey, Jonathan. Yes, sorry, I can see Stanley and Jack Tone. Stanley, I'm just going to unmute yours if you're there. Stanley, are you able to speak? It's
Hello?
Hi, Stanley, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. What can we do for you? What's your question?
I would like to see to interact more because what you are trying to do, it is my first time to be on this meeting, and I was quite very interesting. For me, I work with just a small organization. It is just an NGO. We are trying to advocate for forest conservation and also trying to cover the schools within Dagoretti, North and South. So with this concept of trying to educate the children on the issue of planting trees and nurturing them. So quite, I saw this and I was quite very interested because in Dagoretti we have got a lot of challenges, and as we know right now, we are facing quite challenge of water. We don't have water in taps since maybe 3 weeks ago. We can try to ascend for that. And also we are trying to conserve our river in order for us to get enough water, and we can be able to do maybe a little bit of urban farming within the locality because it's pre-urban, whereby we are living in Dagoretti. So I was very interested to meet some of the stakeholders and also to be connected with them because we want to do a little bit of nurseries within Dagoretti, encouraging groups to come together and do a lot of nurseries, which we have done, but we don't have where we can be able to connect and network and get some of these seedling species. So for us to do this nursery. So I was very, very eager to be here today in order for me also to network with others like-minded who are environmentalists like us, and we see how we can be able to conserve our ecosystem. As you know, the Nairobi River starts from Dagoretti. The main source is from the Dagoretti, and Kikuyu, which is Kiambu. And right now, there is no any water flowing, mature, clean, or what. It's just of sewer. So we are trying to do something, but it's quite hard for us if we don't have other stakeholders and the government institution to try and help us to do this. So I saw this as quite a very nice forum also for me to network with other people who are coming also who are here and are in Nairobi, and we can be able to come together.
Thanks so much, Stanley. I'm not sure if you saw in the Q&A, but one of our excellent project managers, Festus, is really passionate about setting up some WhatsApp groups for people to communicate and share resources. So we'll make sure we send in the recording any details about how you can link up more with some people in country. It sounds like you're doing some great work and could really benefit from some of those partnering opportunities. So thank you. Jack Tone, are you able to unmute yourself? And apologies if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly.
You are pronouncing my name correctly, Sarah.
Excellent. Please go ahead.
How are you?
I'm well, thanks. I'm well, Han. Let me just, I'll just mute Stanley's. Please go ahead.
Yes, I am a former employee of World Vision. So